What's up, Dangers? I'm plant-based Booch because I like eating plants just as much as I like smoking them. Since being diagnosed with ADHD, I've been learning about the brain type and noticing similar characteristics in others who may or may not be diagnosed ADHD as well. Today I'm asking, does Into the Spider-Verse's Miles Morales have ADHD? To find my answer, I'm going to talk about some of the ways ADHD impacts executive function and see if Miles meets any of the criteria. ADHDers are likely, not guaranteed, to struggle with the following. Time management. They live in the present with little sense of future consequences. Or we lose track of time when performing a preferred activity. We're unable to respond to feedback and adjust accordingly. We find it difficult to monitor or evaluate our own performance. We have difficulty with transitions and struggle to overcome setbacks. Working memory, meaning we quickly forget steps, directions, or complex information. Sometimes have poor reading comprehension. Planning, huge for me. Unable to complete long-term assignments or having difficulty with problem solving. Organization. Bedroom and work areas are disorganized. We struggle to maintain friendships, relationships, or play on sports teams. Have difficulty managing anxiety or frustrations when doing work. We make impulsive decisions and purchases and have difficulty pulling ourselves away from certain activities such as video gaming, etc. Easily distracted by our own irreverent thoughts. Feeling tired or we fall asleep while doing tasks. We procrastinate. We often require several prompts to begin a non-preferred task. I'm not a professional. I'm just a neurodivergent nerd. I'll provide some resources in the description for those of you wishing to know more about the ADHD brain type. Is Miles inattentive? Yes. Contrary to the name, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder creates issues with regulating attention. There's not a deficit of it. When we meet Miles, he's working on his art so intensely that he hasn't packed his clothes for his new school. He's listening to music in his own world, as ADHDers are likely to do. He's been so hyper-focused on his art that he hasn't even packed his bag for school yet. The clothes he does shove into his bag are even a bunch of unfolded clothes from his hopefully clean laundry hamper. Oh, and hyper-focusing is when an ADHDer focuses so intensely on one task for hours at a time, they can end up neglecting other tasks or putting off certain things until they're absolutely necessary or an emergency. Miles ends up spacing out while his father's talking to him in the police car. He also goes inside of his head while Gwen is explaining her Gwanda name to him. Also, he talks to Gwen during class and gets called out for it. He also gets called out for being late, which is likely a result of time blindness. He plays it off with the "maybe I'm not late, you're all early" quip to not much success. Speaking of hyperfocusing, he works for hours on his graffiti piece with Uncle Aaron, expressing his own feelings about expectations that he's supposed to meet in his own way. It's much easier for him to start this project that's been in his head rattling around for a while than it is to start his essay. Next, is Miles very emotional or anxious? Well, he's nervous about transitioning to the new school. He's experiencing imposter syndrome over his own acceptance. He thinks it was only because of the lottery that he got in, not on his own academic achievements, that he doesn't deserve to be there, despite the fact that he did pass a test in order to get in. His inner voice is constantly questioning him. It tells him that everyone around him knows he's a weirdo. Rumination is very common in ADHDers. We'll think like, oh, why did I say that thing? Like question every single thing that we've said or done. We'll think back to embarrassing moments in our lives, no matter how long ago they are. Our outer voice tends to speak very quickly and bounce from topic to topic. And a lot of times the inner voice can be just as fast-paced, if not more so. Miles can't unstick from surfaces when he's anxious or afraid, and we see that with Gwen's hair, pigeons, the light in Liv's lab, and even when he takes the leap of faith at the end, there's still some glass sticking to his fingers. He jumps anyway, embracing the fear. The next observation focuses on rejection sensitivity dysphoria, or RSD. It's a triggered emotional response from perceived loss of approval, affection, respect, etc. Miles' camouflage and venom sting powers, for example, are heavily influenced by his emotions, both of which he learns to control after receiving validation from his father instead of disapproval. He actually sneaks out of the spider cave while everyone's talking right in front of him about how he's not ready to be Spider-Man. During the beatdown that he's getting from the gang, things get all fuzzy and noisy, and that's a very accurate representation of what it can feel like to be overstimulated and anxious. Even when the Spider Gang is trying to help him and encourage him, his response to this sense of overwhelm is to sneak away. The note he leaves Uncle Aaron even mentions how he's tired of letting everybody down. He's trying to live up to everyone else's expectations, this identity that they've chosen for him, which is also playing into what we said before about not being able to perceive one's own performance or being able to evaluate ourselves accurately. Often we don't see ourselves as competent as others may see us. We have difficulty starting tasks or completing tasks that no longer hold our attention. Miles gets reminded multiple times that his shoes are untied, but he doesn't do anything about it and ends up tripping off of a building because of it. I already mentioned that before he had all of these unfolded and unpacked clothes, the essay that he didn't start, blah, blah, blah. Is Miles restless? Does he have to fidget or move around? Well, we see that he'd rather walk to school instead of being driven, and while he's walking, we see all of the different stimuli that are making him happy, the sounds, the sights, interacting with the neighborhood. Plus, he gets to tag public property with his stickers. He ends up leaving his dorm to go to Uncle Aaron's, where he's able to hit a punching bag. He starts sketching in his book. He's eating popcorn with Uncle Aaron. He's free to stimulate his brain however he'd like. He can talk about whatever he wants. He doesn't have to mask who he is or how he is. And it's probably due to the spider bite, but we see also that Miles changes positions a lot of times while he's sleeping. Insomnia and general restlessness are common in ADHDers as well. Impulsivity. Well, emotionally distraught, Miles goes to his parents. He leaves 2 minutes later. He impulse buys a Spider-Man costume, trips off a building, not even thinking that he might break the goober, which is in his pocket. This has happened to me with a lot of electronics, by the way. I've had Game Boys, I had a PSP, all of which didn't come to me easy, and I would end up having them in my pockets while I was doing rambunctious things. A lot of times, we don't consider the consequences of the moment. For example, Miles, when he gets mad later on, he actually throws his favorite sketchbook out of a window. He tends to say the first thing that comes into his head when he's interacting with his new classmates. He has this compulsion to invade Gwen's personal space and touch her shoulder, which I blame Uncle Aaron for. We also see that his impulsivity serves as an asset too, though. When he listens to his instincts, he's able to outmaneuver the Prowler. He goes invisible to escape his cop of a father. When Peter finally tells Miles to stop listening to his instructions, Miles is able to web swing for the first time, and he does it with one hand. Being able to make decisions on the fly is something every hero should be able to do. Sometimes you can't think, you just gotta do, His creative thinking even helps him take down the Kingpin. We also see a lot of times that he has his own awesome way of swinging. He does this upward, backward somersault, almost a moonsault sort of thing, and then uses the downward momentum to carry himself up, which I think is just a really great example of kind of making the best out of what seems to be a bad situation and rising above it. Miles really does that successfully. Now, the DRD4 gene is something really cool to me. It's actually a dopamine receptor, and there's a 7-repeated variant of this gene that makes ADHDers less sensitive to the simple tasks that release dopamine. It's not exclusive to ADHDers, but it's shared by a lot of them. So this is why ADHDers are more prone to addiction or angry outbursts, and also being adventurous. We're more likely to take risks. This gene has appeared with higher frequency in populations historically that migrated further from the Pangea continent, meaning that when tribes needed more resources, they had to migrate, they had to move to new places to survive. It was actually the creative, risk-taking people who led the way. Early ADHDers is my theory. It's known as the wanderlust gene as well. And regardless of how nervous Miles is about his new school or pleasing everyone that he loves, which is not his responsibility, by the way, He really wants to fulfill his promise to Peter Pine and become a good Spider-Man. He runs into danger and uncertainty every step of the way. He still acts, even though he's afraid. I think it's safe to say that Miles shares the ADHD brain type. A study I provided in the description below found that Black and Latino children were less likely to be diagnosed with ADHD and even less likely to receive treatment than their white classmates who were diagnosed. I think a lot of social factors play into this, one being that children of color are sometimes expected to exhibit challenging behaviors, just based on our own implicit biases. So they end up flying under the radar and don't get those diagnoses. And add to it that Miles is academically gifted, it's less likely for him to be diagnosed. Or given how supportive his family is, he could be getting the support he already needs and is able to succeed in school as a result. I think it's great that Miles has mentors to help him also. We see that Uncle Aaron encourages Miles to express his creativity. His mother holds him accountable but is still nurturing and validating in her own way. His father is tough on him but eventually tells Miles that he trusts him to achieve his potential his own way and use his spark in a constructive manner. Peter B. Parker sees himself in Miles and trusts that he'll figure it out the hard way, the same as he had to when he became Spider-Man. He's tough on Miles, but he believes in his potential. Miles later creates a beautiful memorial to Uncle Aaron, showing that when hyperfixations are fostered appropriately and constructively and encouraged, an ADHDer can be really successful in their creativity. The leap of faith is a moment I love because I think it's something that ADHDers are prone to do. Miles makes a great Spider-Man once he's given the freedom and takes the freedom himself to do it his own way. I think that in a lot of ways, Into the Spider-Verse is an allegory about otherness. Discovering someone like yourself can be very validating and in some cases, life-saving. This exchange between Peter Pine, Chris Pine's Peter Parker, and Miles sums up how I feel about seeing other adults or children with obvious ADHD symptoms figuring out life. When Peter says, "I thought I was the only one. You're like me." And Miles goes, "I don't want to be." And he says, "I don't think you have a choice, kiddo." I do try to help others who share the brain type or symptoms of it. I hope that they can get the support that I didn't have growing up. I spent my whole life thinking that the problem was me, which has done a lot of damage. And once finding out that a lot of my habits or cycles or quirks were actually shared by other people, it's been a huge relief. It's allowed me to have more grace with myself. And I think hopefully this can do the same for somebody who's watching this video. I'd like to take some liberty with Miles' closing words from the film. "And when I feel alone, like no one understands what I'm going through, I remember my friends who get it. I never thought I'd be able to do any of this stuff. But I can. Anyone could be spicy-brained. You could have a spicy brain. If you didn't know that before, I hope you do now. 'Cause I'm ADHD, and I'm not the only one. Not by a long shot." Like, subscribe, follow for more pop culture, plant-based content, and please comment down below if ADHD has impacted you for better or worse. If you think that Miles does actually have the brain type, if you think that I'm reaching really far with this theory or some of my other theories regarding the film, if you think that this is going to play into Across the Spider-Verse, that they're going to continue Miles showing the similar behaviors that are like concurrent or congruent, whichever word applies, with the ADHD brain type. So yeah, let me know what you think. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time with some more plant-based content and some weird pop culture takes. We'll see where this goes.